Yeah, I guess we should just take a breath, huh?
Good thing to do once in a while, yeah.
My question to you, since breathing is a natural thing, why you think that people are doing it poorly?
Well, every emotional shock, physical trauma, psychological trauma puts an inhibition on the breathing.
Mm.
And so gradually over time, it's like boiling a frog. The breath, if you're in pain, the breath get locked up. And then when the pain goes away, there's a little bit left over, a little tension, and that builds up. And many times the breathing patterns that we slip into in times of emotional disturbance become a habit, an unconscious habit.
Mm.
So if you're dealing with stress, and whenever you're stressed, your breathing speeds up, and you get 10 read the news and you're stressed, watch TV and you're stressed. And so the breathing is being pushed and pulled around by our emotions, our thoughts, and pretty soon we have these habits and patterns, and then we're stuck with them. So at some point, you have to, liberate the breathing, get the breathing back to, good, healthy pattern and maybe its original function. So because of trauma, because of modeling,
Mm.
no one teaches breathing. And so we pick up the breathing habits of our parents. They probably weren't yogi masters. They probably weren't enlightened Buddhas. And so what we model from them may not be really resourceful.
Mhm.
And since almost everyone, 90% of people have some breathing disorder or dysfunction or imbalance, it just seems normal. So things like that sneak up on us.
Mhm. Okay, great answer. I'll go to the second one. So, Dan, I think that everyday life has a lot to do with how we breathe as well. Everyday challenge and stresses that come up. And is the breath the key?
Is it what?
The breath the key to manage everyday life?
I believe so.
Mm.
Every psychological state, every emotional state, every physiological state has a corresponding breathing pattern, an associated breathing quality. When your state changes, your breathing pattern changes.
Mhm.
And the cool thing is, it's a two-way street. So by changing our breathing pattern, we can change our state. And people know that. When you're relaxed and peaceful and calm, your breathing's in a certain pattern. When you're afraid and angry and upset, the breathing changes. So people can see that. We're aware of that. But the subtle changes, most people aren't conscious of.
Mm.
And so I teach people, how are you breathing when you're stuck in traffic? How
Mhm.
are you breathing when someone's insulting you? How are you breathing when someone's praising you? How are you breathing when you're trying to solve a math problem, or when you're enjoying music, or when you're having an orgasm? Most people don't focus on their breathing in those moments because their attention is on the issue at hand. But if you can develop this ability to observe your breathing, you can start making those connections, and you can identify, like, there are breathing patterns that are associated with profound peace
Mhm.
or ecstatic high states.
Mhm.
And once you get a sense of those breathing patterns, you can direct your breathing in a way that you shift your state towards one of those. You can shift out of a state or move towards a higher state.
I think breath work now is becoming very popular as a concept, and having tools and ways to manage the situations
Yeah.
uh, every day. It's something great. So, how do you see this breath work movement developing in the past?
Well,
Because you're one of the pioneers.
I was
In,
doing it before it was a thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's been the leading breathwork has been the leading trend in wellness globally for 10 years.
Mm.
For 10 straight years, breathwork has been the leading trend in wellness globally. So it's like finally the world is waking up to what's right under our nose.
Mhm.
We take it for granted, we overlook it, we underestimate it.
We do it automatically.
Exactly, exactly. And when you get a handle on your breath, you're getting a handle on your energy and you're getting a handle on your consciousness. And energy and consciousness, that's the two most essential aspects that make us human. So by getting a handle on your breath, you get a handle on everything else.
Yes, I like it. So you discovered from knowing from your past, you discovered the power of breath through stressful, life threatening scenarios. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Um, well, I was a deep sea diver in the military.
Yeah.
I was mixing gases, working in recompression chamber, and doing underwater rescue. So I was practicing breath holding. If you could hold your breath for just a little bit longer in a smoke filled building or when you're down underwater, that extra little time, you could get something done. So we weren't really formally trained. Everyone was left to their own means to figure out. But it was very clear to me that when I need to manage my arousal, heart rate goes up to 180 beats a minute, or you start getting tunnel vision, or you're afraid your legs aren't going to hold you up. You need to get a handle on that. And I learned the hard way that when 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 you push to your limit, you can't call your mother. You don't reach for your radio. You don't reach for your gun. You get a handle on your breath. And it was just almost intuitive or natural that once we saw, okay, if I could gather my energy, gather my attention, then well, suddenly I could focus more. I had more situational awareness. I was getting a handle on my arousal. And so it was a very natural evolution to learn that, wow, I can manage my emotional state, manage my mental state. And that's everything in those moments. So we were kind of forced to learn that stuff, you know. If you didn't learn it, you didn't make it or you got kicked out. And so that was my really formal initiation into hacking my way through life by relying on my breath as a tool, as a force, as a bridge. And then once you get into it, and I started studying Eastern yoga and Chinese, and breathing's an ancient science in those cultures, not in the West so much. And so I started being able to understand, aha, so this is why the yogis practice breathing. They needed to regulate their mind. This is why they practice breath holding, because when everything is still, certain things can be felt and seen and experienced. When the wind is blowing and things are moving, you can't quite catch them. But in that stillness, in the pause between the breaths, there's an awareness that arises, beautiful states arise. So one thing just kept leading to another. And then observing other people's breathing taught me a lot. And that I began even before I was in the military. I was an x ray technician. And when you take an x ray, chest x ray, you tell the person, taking a deep breath,
Right.
hold it, and then click picture. And so I was watching people carefully and I realized everybody was doing something different. The muscles they use, what they went through to take a deep breath, what they thought was a deep breath. And it was as if the breath just started speaking to me. So I learned to trust a person's breathing pattern more than the expression on their face. They might look tough and angry, but underneath they're afraid. And so, or their posture, their tone of voice, we can disguise these things. But there are very few breathing masters, and people haven't learned to disguise their breathing. So it's a very pure way to get real, honest information about the person's moment to moment state, emotional, psychological, physiological state. You can't trick people unless you're a breathing master.
Right, right.
So for me, it became a tool that I could really connect with people. I could look through the illusions of what they were saying because their breathing was telling me what was real. And I became a fanatic about just I'm observing your breathing right now. My peripheral vision. I just trained myself to pick up little cues. So yeah.
This is phenomenal because I'm coming from the world of yoga. The breath has been connected with the movement and from a very particular lineage as a tool, obviously, to manage the mind. But what you're offering through life experiences and felt and figured it out, not particularly because somebody said it or gave you a direction, but you lived it and you were able to manage life and extreme situations. So,
And
yeah,
also, if I ever heard of someone who knew something about the breathing
right.
or was teaching breathing,
Yeah,
I was kissing their feet
right.
or I was breathing down their neck
Right.
until I could catch whatever they got.
Some
And like a
information.
bee going to flowers, I
Yeah.
gather pollen from everyone in the last 50 years. That's been my life.
Yes. Wow. Great stuff. I'll stick to my questions, but it's like we can keep on talking about these things. Um, so I have this question about if there is a particular moment in your process in your life that kind of sifted and made um, sifted you and made breathing not just a technique but part of your life or your calling to share it with other people. What was that moment? Is
Well,
it a particular event or a moment that?
yeah, even before
Uh huh.
any techniques, I was a 4 or 5 year old kid in Catholic school.
Yeah.
And the priest came to our class, and every Friday the priest would tour the class. And one day the pastor, the Monsignor, came, not just a regular priest, but and he had his robe and his gold trim Bible and the red trim on his vest. And the nuns, we had these Catholic nuns, she left her desk and she came and sat with the kids. And I thought, whoa, she's one of us. Who is this guy? And so, a little child, like very impressed with his power and his presence and, like, and he talked about the first book in Genesis in the Bible.
Uh huh.
God took the dust of the earth and formed the body of man and breathed into the nostrils of man the breath of life. I don't know, something, it was like a spark just lit in me. I couldn't understand why everyone wasn't excited. Like, what, God is breathing. Every breath I take, God's breathing into me. What, wow. And I guess I got too animated because I have vague memories, but I can remember the priest pushing my shoulders, trying to sit me in my chair, and the nuns tapping me on my head. I guess I just got too animated.
Too excited.
Yeah. And that's my only real memory, but it was like a spark. Something was lit in me. And then I became the kid who was organizing breath holding competitions in the schoolyard, or we'd hyperventilate and then squeeze each other and like pass out and get dizzy. So I started playing with the breath from a small child. And then I had near drowning experiences. And every time I lost my breath, getting it back was the most precious, important thing. And nothing else was important. And so breathing just kept elevating itself in my experience, and it became like the most important thing. And I've followed that passion now, to 75 countries, and I've tried to study every style and method, and Chinese and Buddhist and Taoist and yogic traditions
Mhm.
to extract the breathing, and not so much the dogmas and the rituals, but what's the actual breathing technology that they're applying,
Mm.
and peel away all the other ritualistic stuff and just get to what are the fundamentals, what are the essence of breathing. And it's just been a passion of mine. So I'm a missionary for the breath ever since I was a small child.
Mhm, mhm.
And in the military, or even before the military, when I was an X-ray technician, I had the opportunity to resuscitate someone.
Mm.
I was pushed my portable X-ray machine up to the intensive care unit, and when I was in the room with this guy, he flatlined. He
Mhm.
stopped breathing, his heart stopped, and that monitor beep, beep, just went beep. And I had only learned CPR like 2 weeks before, and so suddenly I'm having to use it, and it was a miracle. I mean, I had this big X-ray plate. The bed was very soft, so I slid it under him so I'd have something hard, and I pumped on his chest 5 times. I breathed into him twice, and he blinked and woke up. It's like a freaking miracle. He's clinically dead, and his pupils are fixed and dilated, and you breathe with them, and they come to life. I was high as a kite for days and weeks. It was, and I couldn't wait to like do it again. And when you when you love what you do, the universe keeps giving you opportunities to do it. I'd be at the beach and someone drowns. I'm in a restaurant, someone chokes on food. I'm on an airplane, somebody has a heart attack. And I started thinking, maybe I'm bad luck. People were dropping like flies around me. And, uh, and yeah, so it's, it wasn't even a choice or a decision to get into breath work. It's just life just kept picking me up by the scruff of my neck and sticking me in situations where breathing was all that mattered. And I couldn't escape it. I tried doing other things, but the, the life wouldn't let me. Yeah.
It's a calling. You bet, Of
Yes, yes.
It's a
A
calling.
submission.
I do have a question for you, and I don't know if there's an answer to it, but is the inhale or the exhale more important?
Well, what was the last thing you did? The other is the most important. Yeah, you get it. If you just inhale, then exhale is very important. And in martial arts, that's one of the subtle ways you can control people's energy, interrupt their breathing, and you interrupt their chi, you interrupt their rhythm, their flow. And so, some people are really good at sensing that subtleties and just interfering enough to knock people off their flow, and then you control them. So, yeah, but most people aren't trained to observe the breathing.
That was my next question. So breathing happens automatically, obviously, and that doesn't help. And thank God, actually, because we don't have to put an effort into breathing. But I do see and hear you when we become aware how much we can influence our existence and our thoughts and feelings. So, in the emotional level, in the response level, in every human playground, I would say that we are called to make decisions and react to things. It seems that breath it's a not only powerful way but a transformative way to do so.
Well, because breathing is completely automatic
Yeah.
and totally under our control,
Hmm.
that's not an accident of nature. That's not a coincidence.
Okay.
That's an opportunity. That's an invitation to take part in our own nature, our own evolution. Humans are the only creatures or species that can be unnatural. A human can be inhuman, unnatural. A dog cannot be an undog. A tree cannot be a non-tree. And so the fact that we can be inhuman and unnatural, the other side of that is we can be superhuman, supernatural. And so the bridge being the breath being a bridge between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, the conscious mind and the divine mind, if you want to call it that, a higher intelligence, that's an invitation. That's an opportunity. And so through the breath, we can hack into certain extraordinary states. We can we can achieve certain high, abilities. And and every peak performer, all the one percenters, you could say, in engineering or medicine or finance, that was one of the things that I started observing when I was like 18, 19 years old, and I was in x-ray school. I met the surgeon who at the time, 1969, they started hip pins, putting pins in hips, and that's surgery. It's a big moneymaker in orthopedics because every day, you know, a million people fall and break their hip. And so he was traveling around the country training other surgeons. And he came to our hospital, Boston City University Medical Center, to train. And because I was an x ray technician, I was in the operating room. So after they put the pin in, I would take an x ray and they could check the position. And hanging around with this guy, first, he had a very expensive suit. Like you could tell, this guy's classy, elegant, and all the other surgeons were kind of like, doo, doo, doo. So he was like an alpha. He had presence, he had charisma. And when I watched his breathing, it was elegant, it was refined. And that was exactly how I would describe him. So I realized, wow, the person's breathing pattern is expressing and reflecting his personality, his traits, his qualities. And I wonder if that's true of everyone. He was like the best in the world at this particular surgery. And I wondered why. I guess if you're the best in the world at anything, do you breathe better than the average person? Are you more conscious of your breath than the average person? Do you practice breathing? Do you use your breathing in certain moments when the average person was not? And I never found any exceptions to that. I did. Rizvi was his name. He's a big hedge fund guy. And when my book was published, my publicist got me invited to a party in Palm Beach. First of all, I'd never been to a party where somebody spent $2 million
On a party.
on a party,
Okay.
1 day party. Like, so I'm way out of my normal element to begin with. But I met really cool people there, and I met the Gypsy All Stars, very amazing musicians and cool people. And I had my book, so I was just, it was a chance for me to pass on my book. And I finally cornered this guy, and I said, "Hey, so and he's like a one percenter, right?"
Right.
I said, "Hey, do you practice breathing?" He goes, "Nah, I don't think about that stuff."
Right.
I said, "You never practice anything?" He goes, "No, I don't do anything." I go, "Wow, you'd be like the first exception." He goes, "Well, wait a minute." He says, "Actually, if I'm trying to go to sleep at night and I'm still going around in my head about some unfinished business, I take a long inhale. I hold my breath for a couple of seconds and then I let it go." I said, "That's breath
That's
work."
right. Yeah, right.
He said, "Well, there's one more thing." He says, "My wife and I noticed that when one of us yawns, the other one yawns. So we play this yawning game together. That's breath work." Whew, I knew there were no exceptions. So
Right.
yeah, it's what was the question?
The- it doesn't matter.
Audios.
So I had a very key question. What breath is teaching us about fear, or how do we manage that particular emotion?
Hmm. Well, I found that fear, um, it's stored or um, it gets trapped in the body up here.
Mm, right, right, right.
Um, and so we even tell people in that moment, calm down, relax. But it's really hard to do. And so by controlling our breath, eh, eh, we actually get a handle on that energy you call fear.
Mhm.
And I found that the energy of fear and the energy of excitement, it's the same energy.
Mhm.
So if I feel excitement and I say no to it, my experience is going to be fear. If I feel fear and I say yes to it, my experience is going to be excitement. And if it's intense fear and I say yes to it, it's going to end up being exhilaration. The greater the fear and then when it shifts. And so recognizing fear as energy, as fuel. And, fear might be a higher degree of anxiety, you could say,
Mhm.
and I learned from a beautiful guy, Robert Gurzon, a psychotherapist in Boston, who he wrote his book, I think, in the late 70s or early 80s, and it was called Finding Serenity in the Age of Anxiety.
Mhm.
And his understanding of anxiety was it was like a cord made up of three threads. So you have natural anxiety. You get a promotion at work. You're on a first date and you're nervous. You're about to lift off on a ski slope.
Mhm.
I'm about to jump out of a plane in a parachute. You should be nervous. That's fuel.
Mhm.
That's you need that to perform. And but then that's different than toxic anxiety,
Okay.
which is caused by this voice in our head. Oh, why can't I do anything right? What's wrong with me? I don't think I can make it. That creates a different kind of anxiety he called toxic anxiety.
Mhm.
And the third form he called sacred anxiety,
Mhm.
connected to the big questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? What happens when I die? And if you don't have comfortable answers to that, it's always going to be gnawing at you, creating a certain kind of anxiety. So his understanding was we need to unravel those three threads because they each need to be dealt with in their own way. And I thought that was a brilliant understanding of it. And so one of the one of the lessons is about anxiety, or you could say fear, it's aliveness. It's the energy of aliveness. It might be distressing feelings of aliveness, but they're feelings of aliveness nonetheless. And so we have to learn to welcome this aliveness. And because if we resist it, it becomes pain and suffering. If we are open to it and embrace it, it becomes a powerful force. People can do amazing things when they harness this energy. And so breathing is a way to do exactly that, to drop the resistance to what's happening, to relax into intensity. And that's a major lesson in training in breathwork. How do you learn to relax into intensity? And so, because love is intense, joy is intense, profound peace is intense. And if you haven't gotten comfortable with intensity, you're missing most of life. And so, we often have, you can have a horrible, terrible thing happen and it cracks you open. If it doesn't kill you, if
Yes.
it doesn't break your spirit, it cracks you open. So, and I've learned that with people, guys who have been prisoners of war and Vietnam, a Holocaust survivor, that if you're cracked open by that intense suffering, intense pain, your ability to experience joy is greater than the average person. And I had a conversation, I had tea with this beautiful lady who was the only one in her family who survived in Poland. And we had tea together. And it was very obvious that she was enjoying every sip of tea much more than me. And so, um, because she'd been cracked open by the pain, she was actually able to enjoy little things much more than the average person. And she could enjoy bigger things that the average person's system wouldn't even allow them to do. And it works both ways. If you can be cracked open by some beautiful, powerful experience, like in a breathwork session that happens, then your ability to handle pain is far greater than the average person's. You don't get triggered as easy. You're not as reactive. You're more open. You can flow in situations. And that's beginning to describe what we learn and what we practice in breathwork. And maybe the simple way to understand it is learning to channel emotional energy through the breath. When you can channel emotional, instead of, if you can, and then you can move that energy, it takes the stress off the body, takes the stress off the mind. And so it's a beautiful skill to have. And with that skill, you can you can experience bigger and bigger things without your system, reacting and going crazy. So it's a natural way to grow, develop personally, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. And so you can tell why I'm a missionary for the breath. I mean, we just keep finding ways that the breath can open and help us and help release things and shift our focus and achieve higher levels of things. And that's why in my book is called Just Breathe, because I learned that those extraordinary abilities and the high states that the ancient warriors and the yogis and the mystics and gurus achieved, anyone with a belly button can achieve those things. And the breath is a key to being able to do that.
You're describing layers of awareness. So, moving from being unconscious and managing life the hard way, you gain experiences. And through the experiences, you gain perspective and understanding. And through these skillful breath awareness and techniques, you can heighten your states. And it's unlimited what it's possible.
So far, I've found no limits. Because the more conscious we become of our breathing, the more conscious we become of our posture, the effect that our words have, the more conscious we become of our environment, the more aware we are of each breath, the more aware we are of every thought and every reaction. And so, breathing is a way to drill and train on increasing and expanding awareness. And so, if I focus on my breathing 100% for a few breaths, I'm 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 becoming more conscious, more aware, and then when I look at anything, I'm gonna see more. I'm gonna connect more deeply. So, yeah, the practice of breath awareness, just not doing any particular breathing, but just becoming intimate and observing the breath, uh, results in other abilities automatically. And conscious breathing is when we take over the breathing. We get a handle on our breath. That means we get a handle on our nervous system. We get a handle on our immune system. And that's huge change.
We talked about the 1%, the people that have managed to accomplish something in there, like elite athletes or uh, professionals or scientists, that 1% that been able to manage to be extremely, extraordinary good at something. Having giving them actually like a person like you personally know and you've advised Tony Robbins, giving him the tools to elevate and control more uh, his experience. I think I just want your perspective on how that 1% can go even in a higher level of of performing or understanding. um yeah, how is your experience with that?
If people have worked on themselves, have done a lot of work on themselves, and they've gotten over a lot of things, business is great spiritual purification practice.
Mm,
To be really successful in business, you have to be aware of your emotions and your reactions and your communication and your energy and your presence. And so people like that, they can take a little subtle adjustment and parlay that into a huge advantage. And so they're more and they've learned to sort of trust or be open to something other than just what they think and what they feel. I mean, that's how they've been able to grow. And so I like working with people like that
and that's
because, like seasoned martial artists, for example, and I didn't learn that until many years ago. I worked at a holistic center. The naturopath there would bring me in. I would see his clients, do breathing sessions, and next door to him was a dojo, a karate studio, where this guy Leonard Mills Jr., who at the time he held the record for breaking the most concrete with his head, 17 and a half inches of concrete with his head. And I just naturally wondered, how do you do that? I mean, if you practice that, how do you know you're not going to fracture your skull instead of the bricks? And well, how do you? So I got into conversations with him, and he couldn't really explain it. It was just like a natural, he could do it, he could show it, but to talk about it, he really struggled. The best thing he'd say is, well, you have to muster up a little bit more force than the force you're resisting. Okay, how do you do that?
simple.
Right, right. How do you do that? And so, but he had diabetes. He had high blood pressure. Um, and I started realizing, listen, you got this tremendous ability to break concrete, but what about your health? What's happening with that? And so that's when I started to realize, wow, um, people who have a lot of chi, who've really got accomplishments, maybe we can learn to use that energy in a slightly different way. And so I work with him. He lowered his blood pressure. He reversed his diabetes because he already had a lot of focus. He had a lot of chi and power. And so my lesson was, wow, if you can break a brick, you can mend a bone. If you can throw somebody to the ground, you can build up their immune system. It's the same energy. And in ancient times, the great warriors were the best healers. I mean, we'd have a battle, I'd break something, I'd hurt something, but I go home and heal myself, and I show up the next day. That's who wins, right? So the ability to heal and the ability to harm, using the same energy. So how do you redirect? How do you get a different relationship with that energy? And I learned that from people who had more energy than me, who had more skills than me. But you hang around with those people, you start making connections, and we all grow together. But most of them hadn't learned to uh, have a different relationship with that energy. They'd train, they had their system, and I'd come in from out of the blue, and I'd have them coming at their abilities from a completely different level. Like, I'll never forget in 1992, the Olympics were in Barcelona, and my mother called me up. I was in Siberia training, and she said, "Hey, there's this guy Alexander Karilin. He's a Greco-Roman 10-time world champion." She said, "You should go meet him." I said, "Okay, Mom." So I asked around, I talked, and I ended up getting a meeting. At first, I talked to his coach. "What do you want to meet him for? Why do you want to talk to him?" I go, "Well, I teach breathing. I'm studying peak athletes, and I just want to observe his breathing and play with him." So they we got to meet, and he's a monster. The guy is just a monster. He could break me in half and throw me. And when I met him, very much like me, he had kind of like the flu. And so when I told him, I said, "Hey, you could pick me up, break me in half, but a little tiny bacteria, a little virus knocks you on your ass." Does you think that's kind of weird that all your power doesn't help with like thing? And he just went, "Duh, duh." And so we became really good friends. I couldn't help him with Greco-Roman wrestling, but I helped him prepare before his match. I helped him to recover more quickly, and we became really great friends. And he's been in the Duma. He's kind of like a representative or senator for whatever. Um, and so we can learn a lot from people. We're all good at something, and some people are really great at one thing, but they suck at 100 other things. And so if you can find someone's superpower and hang around with them, maybe you can absorb stuff. We catch things from each other.
I like the idea that you give the power back to the person because it seems to me that whenever we are experiencing health issues or difficulties, we look outside of ourselves for solutions. So, this is a very hopeful message that we can have a tool to navigate, as well as I absolutely love this word to self regulate.
Mhm.
So, yes, this is really powerful and elaborative. Giving back the power to the people is
Yeah, I mean,
it's a
really,
very
well,
hopeful message.
when people are empowered, they can heal themselves,
Yeah.
they can grow, they can please. So, and breath work is very empowering because no one can do it for you. Uh, and and if you breathe in a certain way, you have a remarkable experience. You have no one to blame but yourself. And so it's really empowering, and it's needed more than ever these days because you don't know who's right, who's wrong, what's real, what's not, who to believe.
Mhm.
And so if we can't connect to something inside of us, we're going to be at the mercy of, shifting winds and politics and finances and other people's energy. And, we need to, we
There
need
is
to
a lot.
find our own
Yes,
inner
yes.
whatever if we're going to make it. So, and breathing will guide us to that innermost source or center or essence or my inner teacher, my
Mhm.
inner healer.
And
Breathe.
trusting that because I think that's
That's the
key. Slowly you develop that inner trust.
how do I know when I'm
Yeah.
following my intuition and not my ego? How do I
Mhm.
know I'm listening to the right voice?
Mhm.
Breathing helps us do that.
Mhm.
If you and we brought people like into casinos, and so before you bet, you take a breath and then and you start going, there are subtle signals. We can develop better intuition with our breath when we open to it. And, to me, beliefs are really powerful. They rule our lives.
Okay, dear.
And beliefs are like a crust around our intuition. And so people aren't relating to a situation, they're relating to their story about it, their reaction to it.
Mm.
Um, you exist in my mind, and I'm in a relationship with the you that's in my mind, and I'm missing who you are. And so breath kind of peels away veils and layers, and it helps open our antenna. When we're small children and we're traumatized, we contract, we avoid, and then that can become a way we go through life. We never want to be traumatized again.
Mhm.
And so certain trauma
Contract.
gets stuck in,
Yeah.
yeah. And breathing start to loosen that up and move it from our system. And wow, after a breathing session, people feel like, "Ooh, I'm like in a new body." We even called it rebirthing in the early days because people felt like they were born into a new body when they released all of this stress and trauma that was stored in their nervous system in their cells. And when I got out of the Vietnam era, when I got out of the military, I mean, I was suffering from PTSD. I had traumatic brain injury. I saw things that I couldn't unsee, and they'd wake me up in the night, and I'd torture myself with what I should have done, what I could have done, and man, and no one's trained to deal with this stuff. Everyone is left to their own devices. And the first time I did a rebirthing session, um, it was just miraculous. I felt like skin sliding off a snake. All of the trauma, all just just melted off me, dropped off. And when I got through with the session, the clouds were so white and the sky was so blue, and every leaf on a tree had a little light around it. And I'm going, oh my God, I've been living in this world my whole life, and I've never seen how beautiful and miraculous life was. So it 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 opened my my senses in some way, and you could say I discovered the ecstatic nature of the breath. And and I was resuscitated at one point. I had a diving accident. My equipment failed, and I had to be resuscitated. And when I started breathing again, I realized I wasn't breathing molecules of air. I was breathing bubbles of light, and they were like bursting in every cell in my body, and it was ecstatic. It was orgasmic, cosmically orgasmic, and I never realized what was happening when I was breathing. Um, and then, but after that, I couldn't forget. I mean, and that experience of breathing light, bubbles of light, I wanted everybody to experience that. I mean, something so ordinary all the time is happening and we're oblivious to it. How is that possible? You know? And so I had had that experience of ecstatic nature when I drowned, and when I lost my breath. And so that's a difficult seminar to sell. People don't volunteer
Yeah.
to drown and then get resuscitated, but it worked for me. And so when I did my first rebirthing session, I realized, oh my God, here's a way that people can have that experience in a contained, self safe way. They can open to the energy in the breath. Because anybody can huff and puff and breathe a lot of air, but can you breathe the chi, the ki, the prana, the life force? That's an art. That's a skill that anybody can learn. Breathing energy and not just air. And one of my favorite teachers, Leonard Orr, said the real skill that we want to teach everybody, or the experience we want to give them, is the merging of the outer breath, which is air, and merging with the inner breath, which is spirit. And that's what I'm always trying to give people an opportunity to and you can't teach it, and you can't give it to somebody. They have to learn it from the inside out. So the best I can do is to get people to become more conscious, more mindful, more aware, get them to relax because that's a really important piece. And then that results in an ability to breathe energy and not just air. And relaxation for me is like maybe the single most important key. Like I live in the Baja in Mexico, and it's a desert where the desert meets the sea. And when it rains, the soil is hard packed, mineral rich soil, and the water just washes along the surface and looks for the ocean. But if you turn the soil, if you loosen the soil, if you soften the soil, when it rains, the soil drinks up the water. So just breathing isn't enough. You have to master this ability to relax while you breathe, and then the prana, the chi, can actually penetrate you. And so most people, when they breathe in a powerful way, they don't relax. And when they relax, they don't breathe. So the art is to somehow
connected to.
Get both.
Yeah.
And don't give up one for the other, but see if you can't get both. And there's no way to teach that. You can't teach breathing any more than you can teach balance. And so you can be learned, but it cannot be taught. So that's my conundrum. How do I teach something that cannot be taught and can only be learned? I mean, you tell people stories, you give them things to practice, and then you leave the rest up to God. That's the best I got. So I travel around the world. I tell stories. I hope there's a lesson in them. I give them things to practice, and then beyond that, there's nothing else I can do. That's between you and God. So, but it seems to work at least most of the time.
So do you formally answer my following question, which is what motivates you to keep doing what you're doing 50 years later, or I'm not sure, is it more than 50?
Hmm. To be with someone when they have a profound awakening or a huge leap in growth or they experience a transformation, it's a blessing. It's to be there when that's happening is just it's very juicy, you know. And there was a shift at one point because I was so hooked on doing CPR, and I resuscitated 19 people in my life out of 30 something attempts. So you always get haunted by the times that it didn't work, and we tend to over. Anyway, so that was such a motivator for me. And but then when I got out of the military and I got into the university and I got my first real mentor, and introduced me to rebirthing, I realized, wow, so instead of breathing with people who are dead and getting them up to a baseline level of aliveness, maybe I can breathe with people who are alive and get them to be more alive. So it was the same game, just in a kind of
Different
better
direction.
level. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was more fun. It wasn't so life and death. But on one level, it was actually more important than the other stuff. So I've always been looking for that next higher order benefit to breath work. You know, what's possible? And so far, I doesn't seem to be any limit to what's possible. So I'm always looking for that next. And every now and then, life sends me a student who they're actually more advanced than I am in enough levels. And so I catch something from them. I think I'm there to teach them, and I walk away like re-inspired and enlightened. And so you can't tell who's the teacher and who's the student. I love when I get lost in that dance. But in psychotherapy, that's a very dangerous area where, clients and therapists, doctor and patient boundaries and so on. But in breathwork, those boundaries seem to dissolve, and you don't know who the leader is and who the follower is and who's in charge. And so I like that mystery. I like being lost in a beautiful, mystical, magical experience, and it motivates me to. I'm always waiting for the next one. Yeah.
What a powerful stuff. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. One more question and we're almost done.
50 minutes.
I know. One
So
last.
much content, so much valuable content, so great stories, so many great stories.
Thank you. Thank God.
The highlight so far was, when I was going, people were dropping dead.
Yes, I mean,
And I'm like, okay, this is a great person to go to a restaurant with, to eat some herb apples.
I know. Have done with you just in case.
Love it, love it, love it. I'm learning so many things. Thank you, just for being here, sharing all the stories.
So, if people will do from out of our conversation, you want them to remember one thing, what that would be?
Well, the simplest things, the most basic things, the things we take for granted, the things we overlook, they're always the most powerful things. And breathing is like so simple. What are you breathing? Breathe in, breathe out. What's to learn? So it's a good example of something very basic, very simple, and yet it seems to be the most powerful thing. So I think people need to remember that and awaken to it, that something so simple as breathing, don't be surprised that it turns out to be so powerful. You should expect that, actually. And so I think my job is to motivate and inspire people to really discover the power and the potential that they're breathing, help them explore it, help them develop it, and help them master it. And only recently, I thought mastery was kind of like the highest state. That's why I call what I do breath mastery. I learned you can't master your breath without mastering your body, your mind, and your emotions. And I don't know how you can master your body, mind, and emotions without mastering your breath. And so it's fun to find a way to have people discover that, trigger, give them, help them have an experience that they themselves, they don't need proof. They have an unarguable experience and they're motivated to learn more and practice and do more. And it's all about practice. I mean, I wish a daily practice wasn't necessary because I'm a lazy bugger. But I doubt that there's anything more valuable than a regular daily practice. Whether you're dribbling a basketball or what, daily practice is like required. You can't get away without it. You can't practice once a week and expect to get really good at something. You have to wake up thinking about it. You have to go to sleep thinking about it. You have to be talking about it with everybody all the time. And with that kind of totality and that kind of passion, anything's possible. We can surprise ourselves what passion and totality does. It's like that mad scientist who's locks himself in his laboratory and and forgets to eat and forgets to sleep. Like that's that totality. That's or the artist who's locks herself in her studio and just compelled and obsessed and like doesn't go out and have blah blah conversations with people, doesn't sleep, doesn't eat. They're just like taken over by this force that's trying to move through them. Breathing kind of puts us in that position where things can come through us. I've had experiences where I was talking to a group or doing a seminar, and I heard myself say something, and I'm thinking, well, that's pretty damn good. I should have thought of that. Well, wait a minute. I just said it. Where did that come from? And so it connects us to some higher part of us. And maybe it helps to believe or realize that we do have a higher part of us. And but most people, I think, why do we just take a pill? Because it's easier than doing inner work. And and we all would like, most people would like everything to change. They'd like the world to change and situations to change, but they're not willing to change themselves. And so breath work is for people like that. If you just want the doctor to fix you or you want to take a pill for this, you're probably not going to be interested in breath work. You found something that works and you don't have to be responsible for it. And so breath work kind of automatically filters people out. And the people who end up at my seminars, I can predict that they're probably into personal growth and that they're going to take responsibility for what's happening in their life and not blame somebody else or wait for somebody else to fix them. Those people, I like working with them better than somebody. I have to convince them that they need to be responsible, that they need to let somebody else do that work. I don't have the patience for it. But if somebody's ready and they're willing and they want to do the work, my job is very easy. I'm not there to fix them. I just help connect them, connect to their spirit, get in touch with their natural abilities, and my job is done. After that, the I have nothing to do. So it's cool because it's very empowering. But I don't know, our culture, especially Western culture, we're sort of trained or programmed to, depend on external things and other people and blame, other people and situations. And so if you're not willing to take responsibility for yourself, you're probably not going to be attracted to breath work. So,
Very true. I think this is powerful stuff, but I think we'll wrap it up here. I think we have a lot of material with what we just the information you gave us and the stories, I think, will bring everybody to understand a little bit where you are and what you do. Thank you. I would love to have you in Greece. So we are planning something. We are not, we don't know exactly the form yet, but would you be willing to come back?
Yeah, I'm a missionary for the breath, and you don't have to twist my arm to talk about breathing, or to get people to look into breath work. Yeah, yeah, I'm there. I'm all in.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That's it. Thank you. That was beautiful.
And what